we will wait until the clock. Oh, there we go. It is 5 o'clock, and we are going to call the Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. If I can get the agenda up, that would be really amazing. While I'm doing that, let's have a roll call.
Here.
Here.
He's excused?
Present.
Here. Thank you so much. And moving on to approval from the agenda, are there any changes from staff?
No changes from staff, Madam Chair.
Any changes from the committee? Councilor Chavez?
Yeah, I propose, since we have Councilor Romero-Worth here, I propose moving the shopping cart ordinance up so that she could talk to that while she's here.
Move it to item A on the consent agenda.
Please.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Motion to move that to item A.
Is there a second?
That is the item, I'm sorry, let me get that. C. So move C to A.
Move C to the top of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Is this a roll call or is this an all in favor? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that change has been made. Can I get a motion to approve the consent, or approve the agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We may have just voted on the same thing twice, but regardless, it passed. And it passed. So moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Are there items to be removed? And for the ease of my brain, even though we moved it to the top of the consent agenda, we will still refer to the shopping cart as item C. Any items to be removed from members of the committee? Councilor Chavez?
Item B and item C.
Okay. Councilwoman Vitarelli, saw a hand go up.
Same, thank you.
Lee Garcia? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And moving on to the approval of the minutes from the July 20th, 2022 Quality of Life Committee meeting. Any changes from staff or members of the committee? And if not, can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, no presentations today. So moving on to items pulled off the consent agenda, we have B and C, and we are moving straight to C. C is a consideration of a bill sponsored by Councilor Romero-Worth, Mayor Weber, and Councilor Chavez. It is an ordinance repealing, am I reading the right thing? Yep, section 10-11 of Santa Fe City Code 1987, creating a new section 10-11 to establish an ordinance relating to shopping carts, incentivizing retail establishments to ensure their shopping carts remain on their property, imposing a fee for shopping cart return, and establishing an effective date. Madam Clerk is here, as well as Jesse Guillen, to speak to this item. Councilor Chavez, the floor is yours.
I wanted to give Councilor Romero-Worth a moment to speak to this, so I will turn the mic over to her.
Thank you, Councilor, and I think our city clerk has a presentation, correct?
I can absolutely show the presentation if you want me to.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, let me.
I think, so I just want the presentation because I think it's helpful in outlining the problem that we're trying to solve. I will say that we had a very good meeting earlier this week with many retailers, and including the Retail Association. And I think, you know, we're talking about how to solve this problem, which is the ultimate goal here. We don't want to be in the business of retrieving grocery carts and returning them to the retail stores, we'd like the retail stores to take over that responsibility. And so I thought it would be helpful. We did this presentation with the retailers. I think it would be helpful for everybody to understand the nature of the problem that we've been dealing with. And sorry, Christine, I thought you were ready to do that.
Walkthrough of the shopping cart ordinance presentation. Basically, we gave an overview about the progression, how we got to the ordinance, which is an increase in complaints related to abandoned shopping carts starting in the summer of 2021. As you all, I think, are aware, it became a top constituent issue, and we launched the pilot project in September of 2021. To date, we've had over 3,000 carts collected. I think we're sitting at about 3,200 right now. We just had 121 collected over the weekend. The cost of the pilot project retrieval and data is at about $50,000 right now. That's not including the $20,000 PO that we just opened to kind of bridge us through the completion of the ordinance. And through this, we basically developed an app in our ArcGIS to track the locations of the carts retrieved, and then the stores that the carts were retrieved, the store that the carts were from. So I will note that the intent of the ordinance really is so that stores have the flexibility to implement any type of preventative measure that they see fit. We're not dictating whether they need locks or bars or geofencing or anything like that. The request is to label each cart with the store name and identification information so that if the carts are located on sidewalks, streets, or property, they can contact a store for them to come be retrieved. Of course, we are proposing that there's only a charge for carts retrieved through this process. If just for owning shopping carts, basically, you don't have to pay us a charge. And the goal is to have no shopping carts on our streets, sidewalks, or arroyos. And really the end goal is to have no fees imposed at all, because the city is really not in the business of shopping cart retrieval. And I do want to emphasize that because I think there was some confusion. The intent of the pilot program was to really collect data for us to see if this was an issue, how many carts, the stores that were in violation, where we were seeing the carts, so that we could address the issue if there was one. The retrieval of the shopping carts was an added benefit because we were already locating the shopping carts. Our contractor was returning them. So I do just want to note that, and that'll come up a little bit later in a different piece. But basically our carts collected by month. Here's a quick breakdown. If you all want more details, please let me know. But basically some months, of course in our peak month, we were at 442 and 449. And then there's been a few months where we've dropped down a little bit from that. And in June, we had 58. That was the first reporting period. And then, as I mentioned, we've collected more carts since then. And of course, our top 5 stores are Walmart, Smith's, Lowe's, Home Improvement, Target, and Albertsons. And Walmart has a substantial, basically, lead over everybody else, for lack of better words, in comparison to Albertsons. This was a quick map that we ran just to show where the shopping carts are kind of focused, which if you can, maybe I can, if you zoom in, there is some location, I guess, there's proximity to some of the big box stores, basically, and where we're seeing the shopping carts. But then there's a small chart breakdown of basically every store that has shopping carts that we've collected. So it ranges from CVS to Dollar General, Home Depot, Hobby Lobby, and again, I'm happy to share any of those details. And then I just did a quick zoom in so that you could see kind of the stars where the bigger box stores are located. This is just some additional information about the administrative fee, again, emphasizing that we're not really in the business of shopping cart retrieval, and that was never the intent of the ordinance. Really, we were in the business of data collection and constituent issue resolution. I do want to note, because this came up, what if we had kept the price lower, so the administrative fee that we would be imposing for the shopping cart, instead of it being $150, like if we did a $25, and the intent was, one, there wouldn't be the incentive for businesses to address the issue directly. I think then we would have still been in the business of them saying, oh, we don't mind paying $25 an hour for you guys to take care of it. But again, we're trying to get out of the business of shopping cart collection. And then emphasizing that our current contract really only focuses on the retrieval and the data right now. And then we did run a quick calculation, which if there was a $150 administrative fee needed, it would be to incentivize the business to address directly, but also to cover an entire operation. Because if we do go into the business of shopping cart retrieval, that's not something that our staff now can currently support, both at the administrative level, but also at the collection level. It's not something that parks could absorb or streets, because we don't have the staffing. So we essentially would have to either keep a contractor on at a higher rate, because then we would be doing sanitation, we would be doing invoicing, calling businesses, storing the carts, because we'd have to store them until someone came to pick them up. So I did just want to kind of break that out a little bit differently so that you could see why basically the cost in the ordinance was set where it was. It's not set in stone, but this was just based loosely off figures that would basically equate to an FTE, at the very least 1 or 2, or a more robust contract. Again, that would include collecting, storing, sanitizing, and then coordinating directly with businesses, both for retrieval and then for payment. So that is where I'm at, but I'm more than happy to stand for any questions.
And if I could just add, Madam Chair, a couple points, because I think there's been some misinformation in the media that I'd love to clarify, if you'll allow.
Yes, go right ahead.
So, couple things. This ordinance specifically has language in it that says this doesn't preclude us from doing other things, like filing criminal charges for people who take them if we can prove that they are the ones that took them. So that is still something the city can do. It might be hard, just because somebody's pushing a shopping cart down the street doesn't mean they're the ones that took it off the property of our retailers. It could be that they found it abandoned in an arroyo and they just picked it up. So, you know, there's a burden of proof that has to be satisfied, and we can certainly go after people who take them. What we are trying to do is reduce the opportunity for them to be taken bought from the retail shops to begin with, and we're asking that retailers help us, because again, we don't want to be in this business. We did have it confirmed by the Retail Association of New Mexico that these shopping carts, the value is about $300 a cart. And so what we're saying is, if we pick them up, and the retailer wants the cart back, and we heard in our meeting this week that they do want the cart back, that we would then charge $150. And that, as Christina's outlined, if they don't want the cart back, we can put it in the landfill, that's fine, and we won't charge for anything. But if you want the cart back, then we would charge $150 is what's currently proposed in the ordinance. And again, we don't want to be in this business. We don't want to be collecting shopping carts. So I'd love for us to get to a point, and again, we did have a good meeting, and I think retailers are taking some steps, and hopefully we can resolve the problem so we don't have to be in the business. And the rate was set at that level, again, to cover the costs of what we're going to have to be doing, which I think Christine outlined. I mean, we're going to have to collect them, we're going to have to store them, we're going to have to sanitize them, we're going to have to figure out who they belong to, we're going to have to invoice if we return them. And so that is quite a burden on the city. And again, that's not what I want to be doing. So we did have a good meeting with retailers about the problem. I think they do want to help us solve it. And let's see, is there anything else I wanted to add about that? I would add, Walmart is the #1 retailer with the most amount of carts that we are collecting. I want to say that they immediately have identified ways to address their carts, and in fact have gone, like some of these other retailers, to hire somebody to collect the carts. So I just want to say that they have been really on top of being responsive, and they're not the only ones. There are other retailers who are taking measures, Albertsons stores being another example. And there are some stores that have had people on contract to collect carts, and yet we still have this problem. And so I don't know, it seems also, I suggested to the retailers that maybe it would be a good idea if, rather than each retailer hiring their own retrieval contractor, maybe they should pool their efforts and do this as a collective matter. But there's some other things that they can do, and they are starting to work on this. So again, we're trying to just solve the problem, and I just wanted to take the opportunity for Christine to outline how many shopping carts we're dealing with. It is the #1 CRM complaint from constituents calling. It is not the business we're in. We want to be doing things like cutting weeds and filling potholes, not collecting shopping carts. So I just thank you for letting me make those comments. And Christine, you had something else?
I did just, Madam Chair, if I could speak to one more point, and it is that we are really focused on abandoned shopping carts. That is a point that's come up. We don't currently collect carts that have possessions in them or belongings, so we're not in that business. And I know that some of our stores also expressed concern about maybe approaching people that had their belongings in the carts. We don't currently collect carts that have belongings. So we're very sensitive to that. We're only looking at shopping carts that are abandoned.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Christine, could you please send that presentation over to the committee, as well as get it on PrimeGov, so that the public who would like to review it would have the opportunity to as well. And Counselor Chavez, I will send it back to you.
I just want to thank Councilor Romero-Worth for being here and doing all the work behind this and being collaborative and really working to address a need and doing that in a sensitive way from all directions. I think that's the best way to accomplish it. So thank you, Councilor. And I yield the floor.
One other thing. I would appreciate it, I guess, ask the committee if you might postpone this item to your next Quality of Life Committee meeting, just to give us some more time to continue our conversations. We did get a letter today. I think you all were copied on it in response to our meeting earlier. I haven't had a chance to read it other than very quickly, and I would like the opportunity to continue working with the retailers around this issue. And as I've said, they have been responsive, and they are, I think, interested in helping us get out of this business. So if we could postpone this to your next meeting before taking action on it, would be great.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a motion to postpone this to the next Quality of Life Committee meeting?
I move to postpone this to the next Quality of Life Committee meeting.
Is there a second? Oh, yeah, well, don't worry. There is still going to be opportunity for discussion and questions. Is there a second to the motion, though, as long as it's on the floor?
Second for purposes of discussion.
And additional questions or discussions? Councilwoman Vidareal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for staff for putting the data together. I think when the pilot project came about, we all were curious about what that would look like, and I think it was helpful to see the extent of the problem, which I personally don't want to keep getting emails about that. It shouldn't come to councilors anyway, complaints about shopping carts. We have way bigger issues to deal with right now. So that's been, I think, hard, and then like shuffling it off to staff for them to kind of deal with. And so I appreciate the data collection. And I guess I was just wondering if the sponsors had looked at this approach. Well, for one, had looked at what other places had been doing to solve this problem, because I know it's happening across the country. And if there was other approaches that was more of a carrot approach versus a stick approach to solve the problem. So maybe you could start there and just give some information.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that we would love it if people, and this is kind of a public service announcement, please, if you see a shopping cart and you can tell who it belongs to, call the store. Don't call the city, because now I think we're seeing that there's more awareness, and hopefully the stores will be quicker at picking them up. We do get, as has been said, we do get a lot of complaints, and they, as Christine said in our meeting this week, they do multiply. So, you know, somebody drives down the street, they see a shopping cart, they call. They may not be the only one who calls on that one shopping cart. If we don't pick it up fast enough, they call and they come back on their way home and it's still there, they call us again. And so, again, we have been taking a lot of calls, a lot of staff time on this, so that's part of the problem. In terms of carrot and stick, again, I don't see this as a stick. We are only going to charge the fee if the retailer would like the cart back. It is set below what they are worth. They have to replace them one way or another. They either pay the $300 that they're worth to get them new, or they pay us $150, and that covers our costs of collecting, storing, sanitizing, and invoicing for them. So I don't see this as punitive. I would say also we have done research, and other cities do charge for shopping cart retrieval and returning. So we're not charging the stores. I mean, they may be damaged, and they may not be of any use to the store, in which case we'll put them in the landfill. But if you want them back, we do need to cover our costs. So we can talk about the $150. But again, we'd like to get out of this business altogether, and I think there are a number of things that retailers can do, they are starting to do, and hopefully we can get to a place where we don't have this problem anymore.
Thank you. Where does it, I think that was one thing I didn't really understand from the ordinance about it will only charge if they want them back, because I just assumed anytime we see them abandoned or people call us about it, we would automatically charge the retailer for that. Just so I know where it is.
Yeah,
that
hold
has,
on,
that has come up from
Yeah.
people asking me about that.
Yeah,
didn't
and I
really know
have,
where to go.
let's see, I just pulled up the bill. Retriever. So any shopping cart, so we're on pages 3 and 4, line 25, and lines 1 and 2 on the 4th page. Any shopping cart that is retrieved by the city or contractor of the city pursuant to this section shall be returned to the retail establishment upon payment of an administrative fee of $150. So if they don't want it, we're not going to charge it. And then I just, as long as we're there, the next section on lines, on page 4, lines 3 through 5, Nothing in this section shall prevent the city from pursuing other applicable legal remedies to address violations of this section. So, you know, again, I think that sort of is the catch-all for if a retail store has video footage of somebody taking the cart and wants to file criminal charges and can identify the person and has the evidence that the person has taken the cart, we can file criminal charges. It's not precluded. But I don't think it solves the problem.
Yeah, I think the fact that the retailer can file the criminal charges because it is technically their property really makes more sense to me versus the city trying to figure out how we fit into the picture of criminal charges. So that puts the onus on them too. I think that is an important piece. Did you find any other models that were working across the country for this issue? I mean, just in the research, did you find any other kind of?
I mean, there are other cities that charge us, you know, a fee to have carts returned.
And is it similar to what we're thinking?
I think ours is a little higher, generally speaking. But again, what we're trying to do is cover our costs. And I don't know, Christine, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, I can add a little bit more context, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal. There are other ordinances that are charging carts at similar price points, actually. We are a little bit high, I think, but one of the things that we were more flexible on is that other ordinances actually had a certain number of preventative measures and outlined what they were. So they dictated that it was like a security guard or a staff person. They actually required the locking of shopping carts, where we were more flexible with that and said it would be up to the real retailers to determine their type of preventative measure. So that's, I think, where there was a little bit of balance. We gave more flexibility, and instead of saying you have to have these 3 preventative measures or this 1 preventative measure, we just said you needed to implement preventative measures. And again, this shift was more focused on allowing the retailers themselves to determine what worked best for them in terms of, again, preventing. And also the requirement of labeling. That was something that we did find in other ordinances, and that, again, was to encourage residents. It's a funny thing, if you see a shopping cart that belongs to Target, people don't think to call Target to say, hey, your shopping cart's on the sidewalk. They call the city to come get the shopping cart for Target. And so we're trying to encourage people to contact the store where the cart is from, and that was something that we actually found in other ordinances that we looked at. But yeah, we found a variety of stores that charge for you to, similar to like the airport, you know, $1 to take out a cart and $1 when you got back. But there were a lot of different things. We just were a bit more, I think, flexible in the measures that the preventative measures, and in that, kind of the cost of the cart was a little bit lower.
And if I can add, I believe some ordinances required that retailers submit plans to the city saying, we will address this problem in the following ways. And then those plans, I don't know, maybe you can speak to that, had to be approved or something. That just seemed like administratively way more than we needed to be doing. And can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal. There were a lot of ordinances that did require a plan be submitted, be approved. If someone was in violation, they would have to pay a fee and coordinate with businesses. So again, I think our approach was really, we're trying to get out of the business of the shopping cart operation, but with that, not including some of those details where, you know, we would be out approving or doing inspections at certain stores, and then determining if they are in compliance and at the level in which they're in compliance, because that was something we saw where someone would be reviewing plans, determining if those were appropriate measures, and then basically ensuring that the stores stayed in compliance, and if they didn't, there was a second set of violations that the stores would have to incur.
Yeah, I hear you. That sounds more complicated and not really what we have the ability to do. That made me think of other things that I just lost my train of thought. When you were talking about how folks, they call the city because they want a shopping cart removed. Well, in a lot of cases, they don't have the information. Like, I would have no idea who to call at Target to tell them to come pick up a shopping cart. So the fact that you added that in as a requirement to put information, that they're required to put information on their carts, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I can point you to that language. It is on page 3, lines 9 through 17, identification requirements for shopping carts. Every shopping cart provided by a retail establishment located in the municipal boundaries of the city must have a sign permanently affixed to it that contains the following information: the name of the owner, a valid telephone number, and a notice to customers that the removal of the carts from the retailer's establishment premises is prohibited.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is, I guess this is more of a stick approach. So in the ordinance, did you all consider requiring cart containment technology? I've heard it's effective. They use it in the other states. We use it now for some. I know there's ways to still kind of push it, but it's pretty, it doesn't.
Yeah, so
function very
there
well,
are there are quite a few stores that have it already. There are, and again, I haven't had time to review this 2-page letter that we've all gotten. There are, Albertsons, for instance, is making a considerable investment in installing these systems in, I think, a couple of their stores that don't have them. But they're not foolproof, right? I mean, if you really want a shopping cart, you can disable them and take them off. But again, it's better. So in terms of requiring, I think we were sort of leaving that to businesses to decide what's the best thing for them. I think also, when you go back to Christine's map, you know, there is a concentration of carts in particular areas, and I believe the retailers are going to look at that data to see, you know, there may be solutions with where they're getting left. And, you know, again, that's another conversation that we can still have about whether there are solutions for that end. So I think I got off your point, but.
I think that helps. And I did read that letter, and I appreciate the kind of what you all are wanting to be part of the solution, because I do think as stakeholders, you do have, you know, should have say and input on this. So I think this has sparked the conversation. And so I think it's good that we postpone so that there's potential for maybe other solutions to figure this out. And then I guess we'll just wait till, what is this? This goes to, if we postpone it.
It'll come back here in 2 weeks, or whenever our next Quality of Life Committee meeting is. So it won't move forward at this time. It'll just stay in Quality of Life.
Got it. Okay. I'll yield the floor. Thank you all.
Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, when this first came out, reading through what was being proposed, you know, I take a look at it from the perspective of a business. And what is the problem? We see it everywhere, and then I think when we take a look at that map, it really comes down to who's taking the carts, and again, how does that affect each business's ability to be profitable? How does it affect their overhead? And I know the city's not wanting to be in this business, but we have the problem. And we're not really looking at what the problem is, and it's shopping cart theft. How do we fix that? That is the problem, and we're trying to put a Band-Aid on it, and how do we fix this? I want to ask a question. So in regards to the carts that would be sent to the landfill, there will still be a cost associated with that. Is that correct?
Christine, is that you?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, there would be a cost associated with it. I think, though, given our desire to continue to be a sustainable city at the level that we are, we probably would want to consider doing something different, either reselling those carts or recycling them into a different way. But, you know, if they were broken or the stores didn't want them back, then yeah, they would go in the landfill.
And again, I just, I can see, we're just trying to fix an issue, and it relates directly to our unhoused community. It really does. And I think we really need to focus on that. Creating more costs to, in the first place, it's creating a cost to our businesses, which in turn is being passed on to the consumers, which in turn creates a problem with the elderly folk or people who are disabled, those that are disabled shopping. They don't have carts because of this issue that we're having. And so, how many of these carts are going to be returned back in good working order? What does it cost the stores? And again, it goes back to, in my belief, in my opinion, that these costs pass back on to the public. And it is through, and so we, trying to put our finger on what the problem is, and the problem is theft of shopping carts. It really is. And how do we crack down on that? I know you can't take a person who has nothing and charge them $500, because what does that do? But it comes back down to the overall policies of our city, and I think we really need to take a look at those things. So the last comment I would like to make is that I would like to know who's involved from the retail store. We listed Walmart, Smith's, Lowe's, Target, Albertsons, and they are concentrated in those areas where the majority of the unhoused community is. And so I want to, I would like to see the input from them of what they're saying, and go from there. So I do appreciate you tabling it to the next committee meeting, and I'll yield the floor from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or discussion from members of the committee? If not, I have a couple things. One, Counselor Lee Garcia, I think you bring up a really good point about what is the root cause of this issue, and where we need to be focusing. And that is one of those really interesting concepts, is when we look at the amount of staff time that is going into picking up shopping carts. Unfortunately, we do only, there's a limited amount of time that we have as a city to be focusing on these things. So how we look for solutions to take some of these really time-consuming issues off of our plate is important. And so I think that that's part of this conversation of where should the city be spending its time and where should the city be spending its money, and really how we can work with the businesses so that it does pull some of those resources away from the city so that we can be spending them, really focusing on how are we going to be solving or reducing the unhoused population challenges that we're seeing in the city, and we will be getting to that a little bit later on discussion. We'll actually be able to hear a little bit more about Santa Fe Suites. So I'm looking forward to that conversation as well, as it is related. One question I do have, there are some retailers that already have some of these cart containment strategies in place. And I think that it would be interesting to see, as some of the data that's being collected, especially through these conversations, what those are looking like, how many carts are being collected from retailers that do have cart containment strategies in place. Are there cart containment strategies that we see are working better than others? Christina's smiling at me because I feel like she has the answer to this question already. So, Madam Clerk, if you would like to expand upon where you know I am going with this, please go right ahead.
I am a terrible poker player. Madam Chair, I was going to note that we have been working with Target specifically. They do have the locking system. They are still in our top 5 for carts collected. They also have an increased security. They have a security guard at their exit, which doesn't necessarily, their security guard isn't, to monitor their shopping carts, but they do have the cart corral, and they also have a cart collection company on contract, and so their carts are actually washed, sanitized, and delivered back to them separately. But we're waiting to see. There hadn't been there has not been a great reduction at this point, so we are looking at kind of, there are a model right now for that, but they do have the cart locks on their premises, and you're not supposed to be able to push them out of their parking lot. However, they are still in our top 5.
And is that cart locking system new or old?
I believe it's an older system, and I don't know if there's intent to change their system, but Albertsons, we did meet with a large number of retailers in Santa Fe, everyone from, I think, Ace Hardware and Party City to Connie's and our big box, along with our retail association reps. And they all, as Councilor Romero-Worth mentioned, that they were interested or pursuing technology. So there is some new technology out. There was Raskin. There's another technology that I know.
Costco or something.
Yeah, I have it written down, I apologize, that they're looking at implementing. But again, I think this is going to be a collaboration of the types of things that are working for certain areas, perhaps, that maybe work better in some than others. But we do know that we have stores already that have some of the cart containment and are using cart collection already. And so I think we're starting to see those numbers reduce, but we're still obviously not at 0. And now other stores are coming on board with some of their own technology. So we're really excited to see what that does in terms of the number of abandoned shopping carts or carts leaving the stores.
Okay. Wonderful, thank you. And I think that at our next meeting, when this does come back, maybe some more detailed information about who has strategies in place, how many carts are we seeing, and then moving forward, I think that it will be important for us to continue gathering data on what we are seeing and continuing the partnership with the retailers to also understand what they're seeing as well, because there could be a moment where if we're no longer gathering them, we're not collecting that data. So if they are willing to be in the data collecting, why do we keep saying that we're in businesses of things, but if they're willing to help with data collection and tracking of this and really understanding what this problem looks like, I think that will be something to continue to consider. I'm guessing this might be an iterative process. I don't have any further questions or comments at this time. Again, we will be bringing this back assuming that we vote to bring it back, we will be bringing it back in 2 weeks. Councilman Vidireal, did you have one more thing?
Madam Chair, just a follow-up question from yours for Christine about Target and specifically, did these measures that you were talking about, did they implement them most recently because this has been a problem, or had they been already in place when we started collecting shopping carts and we did the pilot? I was just curious, like, timeframes, if even for themselves, because they realized it was a problem, but do you know anything about Target and specifically?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, Target already had their cart locks in place, and then they added the cart retrieval contract after they saw that it was also an issue for their carts leaving their premises. So I think a lot of the stores are seeing what we're seeing. I know Total Wine actually spoke a bit during our meeting and mentioned that, he has a limited number of carts, and so when I think we've collected 83 of their carts, that's a good number for them. And there's a delay to even get new carts. I believe Albertsons mentioned there's like an 8 or 9 month delay to get carts. So it really is in everyone's best interest if the carts stay on the premises. And Target already had the locking carts in place, but they did add the collection as an additional measure.
Thank you, and I appreciate Councilor Garcia's point about how to tackle the root cause issue in the unhoused community and what this means, and it's complicated. It's not about shopping carts, it's about trying to figure out this other angle of like what we're all kind of grappling with homelessness and just challenging issues with housing in general. So
Can I
want to end there.
comment on that?
Yes,
So I want to make the point that it's not just the homeless that are taking carts off-site. And I think some of this data shows that people who don't have cars or don't have any other way to get their groceries home are taking carts and then abandoning them. And, you know, I don't know if there's solutions around that. I know in big cities, sometimes people have a little push cart that they own, that they take to the store and back, and, you know, whether that's something that's feasible given our, you know, sidewalks or lack of sidewalks, or where these carts are being abandoned, I don't know, but clearly you can push them to someplace. So I just want to make sure that it's a bigger problem than just the homeless. It's some of the apartment complexes near these retail big box stores.
Thank you, Counselor. And I think that'll help, Christine, when we see that map and we can zoom on in. That'll be really helpful. Let's go ahead. I would like to call for the vote. We have a motion and a second to postpone this item until the Wednesday, August 17th Quality of Life Committee meeting. If I could please get a roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you, Counselor Romero-Worth, for being here. We are moving back now to item B. This is consideration of a bill sponsored by Councilwoman Villarreal and Councilor Rivera. It is an ordinance amending SFCC 1987, Section 23-5.1 to add definitions for cultural event and small commercial event, and amending SFCC 1987, Section 23-5.2 to allow up to 8 small commercial permits for cultural events on the plaza, including Juneteenth Indigenous Peoples Day, and 6 additional events selected by lottery. We have Melissa McDonald, Jesse Guillen, and it looks like also Regina Wheeler here to answer questions. Counselor Chavez, you pulled this. On to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
No, go
I
ahead.
was wondering if, as the sponsor, I could just give some context.
I was actually going to turn it over to you, so.
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you for staff for being here. Welcome back, Melissa. I know you just got back from vacation, so I appreciate you being here. And to the staff in the back that has to listen to all our wonderful items, thank you. And community members, so thank you. I just wanted to give you just a little bit of information about how we came about of this ordinance amendment. And this is what I consider kind of substitute that we reintroduced due to changes that had come about from stakeholder meetings and staff input over the last couple months. And I just want to say this issue, since I've been on council, there's been various existing cultural events that have been held at the Plaza Park that have had a desire to incorporate vendors to enhance their event and to support what they say is like entrepreneurial spirit, you know, commerce associated with that cultural event. And so it was particularly expressed by organizers that makers and artisans have been hit hard by the pandemic, and they want to be able to have them be incorporated at events. So currently the ordinance that we have in place doesn't allow for this. Events can't even have T-shirt sales or memorabilia sales without making any change to this ordinance. Hence the reason why we came up with what is called the small commercial event permit option. This ordinance amendment proposes to allow for up to 8 small commercial event permits for one-day existing cultural events on the Plaza Park. And I want to say that we did actually make the amendment. It used to be 10, and so we reduced it to 8. The named events that we've actually put into the ordinance are Indigenous Peoples Day, Juneteenth, and now Santa Fe Pride is actually, with the recent amendment, I have added to the mix as the named events. And then the remaining 5 permits for one-day cultural events are subject to a lottery selection in January for each calendar year. And to participate in that lottery, the nonprofit organizations must have organized and held the same event, and it has to be a city-permitted event in at least two of the prior 5 years, and may only submit one entry in the lottery per year. And that language came about from some of our stakeholders. They thought that they wanted to have events that had a track record, that have had permitted events with us before, instead of someone that decided, oh, you can have vendors and I'm going to put together a arts and crafts fair. So that was kind of what we wanted to do with organizations that had a track record. The other thing about the lottery idea was to really give potentially other existing cultural events the opportunity to enhance their event by allowing vendors as a secondary use. And I did want to clarify that Pride initially wasn't added into the mix as one of the events to be allowed for small commercial event permits, because they were looking at and exploring other routes for their organization. And so we met with them, and ultimately they decided that they wanted to be added back in as an eligible small commercial event permit, hence the amendment that's in the packet. The other thing is just, I guess to summarize, the changes will allow for 8 existing cultural events to have a secondary use for the event to allow vendors to participate in commerce activities. And there are limitations, of course. These vendors would be limited to only using the Plaza Park and not the streets. Streets would not be able to be shut down for vendors. The spaces reserved for our Plaza artists, artisans, and the push cart vendor program, which we run, the city does, will remain in place during the small commercial events. And then the other piece is related to the amendment sheet that I have in there, is that I've added language based on input from the Plaza artisans, is that they will not be charged additional fees to sell during small commercial permitted events. And then all of the other regulations, permitted and not permitted on the plaza for events, will apply. These are one-day permitted events. The small commercial permitted events have to follow the same review and approval process that we outlined for the major commercial events. And all the vendors must have special event vendor licenses, which requires them to have a business license, and they must file and pay applicable gross receipts tax on their sales. So I just want to mention these changes really kind of, and this was also from staff, changes that occurred, and it was done by considerable stakeholder outreach. I mean, I've talked to and had meetings with the Plaza artisans and pushcart vendors, the Plaza Merchants Association, organizers of Plaza events, Chamber of Commerce, and then other individuals that are part of the stakeholder group. So I will pause there, and I don't know if staff has anything to add to that, but just wanted to give some context of what has changed since the last version of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilor Travis, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to first start by thanking Councilwoman Villarreal for the work on this. I am excited to see that there's this opportunity for the commercial events. I do have some concerns. A few, well, one being the amount of events, the other being the lottery system. So with the, and let me get to my page, I'm sorry. Needed to find the resolution. So with the major commercial events, we define what those events will be. I would recommend or ask for consideration of doing the same for the small commercial events as well. I think that that is a lot of events. I have multiple worries. One, kind of the concerns that have been brought up by merchants downtown. The other being just the demand on staff. So those are my two concerns, and I don't know if anyone could speak to those. I do also wonder about the lottery system and if that's most appropriate, especially for us to kind of, how do we define the lottery system? How does that, I know that we're like, it's random, it creates more equity, but I'm not sure that's the case necessarily. So I feel like if we're going to identify certain events for the small commercial, then we should just define which events they will be altogether as we did the major events. That's a consideration. I do appreciate your work so much, though. I think it's necessary. I love that they're going to have the opportunity for vendors, but I also think that we need to re-examine that process in particular, which affects the way we're providing that opportunity and to how many. So that's just the consideration that I wanted to speak to.
Thank you, Counselor. I heard two questions that I believe would be best answered by staff. One is the impact on staff, and two is more details on how this lottery system works. Councilwoman Villarreal, would you agree staff is the correct?
Sure, we can start with you all, and I can, one thing I did want to just mention is that these aren't new events. They can already have tabling of information booths, which is already something that the city is required to be part of to permit. And the difference is that some of those tables will be vendors. And I actually found out this year from Pride is we made even the information booth folks get their CRM and do all the same things that they would do for businesses, even though they weren't selling. So I was like, wow, we're doing the same thing already with events that currently exist. So that's why I feel like we were wanting to, I would like to hear from staff, and we've talked about this quite a bit, but I guess it was not another burden because these were already existing staff. I know there is a difference of potential trash accumulated at events if there are vendors. I don't know, maybe you could speak to that, but I'll just stop for now.
Is that better? Yeah, okay, thank you. Counselors, yes, the impacts to staff are accounted for in the FIR. We do anticipate that there will be additional needs, such as inspections, education, about 10 hours per event for understanding the permit, processing the permit, those types of things. Anytime you have an event on the plaza, it's a guess as to what is going to be asked for. We've made some assumptions in this FIR based on the fact that these are existing events, or that this is the premise that these will be existing events. So we've tried to account for it. We may not have hit the mark right, and we are definitely recommending that we evaluate this every year and see if we are hitting the right mark. But it's going to be permit requirements that we have to meet. It's about inspections, at making sure that the booths are set up properly, they're not going in the fire lane, all the types of things you need with commercial events that push the limits of what you might have there. So that's the biggest part that I see affecting staff, and it's a hard thing to determine. We don't know what they're going to be asking for. We had to make assumptions at this point. And what was the other question? I'm sorry, Councilor Cassett.
The other question had to do with what the lottery system process would look like.
Councilors, that also was a concern of many of the stakeholders. At the moment, the way that we envision the lottery system working would be that it would be sent in via email, and it would be time-stamped when it is received on January 1st.
So anything that was received as of January 1st, I apologize, I'm now just clarifying. Anything that is received as of January 1st, on January 1st, there is that lottery. So it'd be time-stamped to make sure that it came in by 12:59 on December 31st.
Yes.
Okay. Wait, 11:59, excuse me. 12:59 is.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
There was discussion, Barbara had suggested it, that they'd have to actually fill out an application and then submit it in a timely manner. The other thing was, I think there was more concern that people should just allow, in other conversations that we had, that I think staff was there too, that stakeholders are like, why doesn't every event be allowed to have vendors? Why are you limiting them to, in this case, 8? And even at EDAC, they thought that was odd. So there's varying opinions about what should be allowed. And I want to be cognizant of staff, obviously, to make sure that we have the ability to be a good partner in community events and make sure that they know what they need to do and be clear about that, and that we have capacity and really in all regards of things that we're trying to achieve, even in code enforcement, we don't have enough staff. So I feel like this is like an ongoing problem, not just related to like trying to figure out how we support events in the community. So I want to be cognizant of that. But I just want to be clear, lottery was kind of like people wanted more options and not necessarily having lottery. They wanted to have more events just to be allowed to have vendors whenever. So I'm trying to strike a balance between different stakeholders here that I've talked to.
Yes, Counselor, and just to clarify a little more, so essentially it's first come, first serve, and we can identify that based on the timestamp that it was submitted. And the reason that we need to limit it is that if every event was allowed to have commercial activity, we'd need a lot more overtime. Because it doesn't just impact the plaza, even though it's restricted to the plaza. This was designed very carefully to say that it had to be curb to curb inside the plaza. But, people take things with them and they use trash cans and, other areas of the city. So that is why we appreciate the limitation in this case.
Thank you. And just to clarify, we are no longer doing first come, first serve. That was the first iteration of the ordinance. This is now a lottery, correct?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
but if you're the first in line, you will get it because it's timestamped. Whenever you submit it, it's first come, first serve, it's a timestamp.
I don't understand how you can have first come, first serve and a lottery.
When you submit it, it's going to come in, and we're going to know at 12:01, 12:02, 12:03, so the top remaining spaces are selected by the time that is submitted.
That sounds like first come, first serve to me.
It's a lottery, though, because you have to submit it, so it's randomized.
So it's randomized when it comes in?
You have to be the first one in there. Whoever's, as it's going through the web, whoever gets it in is the one who gets it. We're not doing like a lottery that you pull out of a hat.
We're not, so now we're doing
No.
first come, first serve again.
Yeah, that sounds like first come.
Well, the way we described it, that's how we described a lottery system. How are you envisioning lottery, that you pick people out of the hat?
Yes, that anybody who has submitted a request for a commercial event by end of day on December 31st, that they would either be picked out of the hat or there are computer systems that will do it for you. That's a lottery to me. This sounds like whoever gets their application in first gets it. So that's first come, first serve, in my opinion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, because I think staff, we talked about lottery in the sense that the names would come in or the applications would come in, and then staff would have to make a decision about, well, for one, if they submitted on time for that one day. But I guess I don't know, I guess I would ask Melissa about that. How are you feeling about doing this selection if they get their names in at the time we require them to, and then they're randomly picked? Because that is a lottery. I see what you're talking about, but I
Sure.
guess
Counselors, that's certainly an option. If that's how you want us to administer it, we could collect them and have a beginning point and an end point and do some kind of draw. That is not how it's been talked about at this point. It's been more first come, first serve. If that would be modified, we could do it that way.
I think first come, first serve, especially considering that we're talking about January 1st, and most people are not submitting applications for commercial events on the evening of December 31st. They are out doing other things. This sounds like a detail that needs to be worked out. I do have some more questions about the lottery, and I apologize. I forgot to go to the rest of the committee first before I just started asking questions. Councilor Chavez, did you have any additional questions or comments?
I think I got a little more confused. The same question, I think clarification between lottery, first come, first serve. It sounds like, yeah, that's an application process, and so whoever applies first would be the ones that are able to have an event. So the lottery within is a little misleading, but yeah, I think that needs to be ironed out maybe.
Anything else? Councilor Lee Garcia, did you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be to Councilwoman Villarreal. How many other organizations have really, been interested in these small commercial events? I mean, we have plenty that happen on the plaza, and I think that, I think you created a really great point in terms of what happens when a band's playing on the plaza and they want to sell their CDs or their own T-shirts and things. And I think it does happen sometimes, even probably against our own knowledge or ability to find out what's to enforce the rules. But for these specific events, how many potentially are wanting to try to get? And I guess I'm alluding to how do we make it most fair to everyone that has the wishes to take one of these spots?
Thank you for the question. Personally, I've only heard of, other than the ones listed, like 5 other groups. That's why we kind of reduced it. Although Barbara had said over the years, there's been people that asked about it, not that they were going to potentially pursue it, but why they couldn't sell and have vendors. And it was, she said 30, but that's been kind of fluid. So yeah, it's kind of, I think what Councilor Rivera was talking about is that allowing to see the interest of this, so we get a better idea, and that's why we wanted to do the lottery system. As it relates to what you were asking about bandstand and the music, they are allowed 1 tent to provide information about the bandstand, and then they can sell CDs. And they've made an amendment, or they've made a accommodation for them, Barbara has, so that's probably the only kind of anomaly, really. Is there another question?
No. You answered my question. I guess the other thing that I would be on my mind in terms of this is again, I think that the clarification on lottery versus first come first served, because that does make sense. If somebody's on a timestamp and you cut it off at 5, I'm good with the 3 that are established. You have Pride, you have Indigenous People Day, and you have Juneteenth, and they're already somewhat established, and I think that's great to include this in there. What does is there clarification of what the organization, what types of organization are able to sign on to this? Is it any organization? Is it anyone who comes to the table and wants just to have a community day? Could it be the local chapter of, Knights of Columbus? What are the criteria? And I know a lot of this stuff really is going to be hashed out once we pass this ability.
Right. Yeah. Well, we actually have that hashed out, so it is nonprofit organizations. It can't be a for-profit or an individual requesting a permit for an event. And then we put in that it has to be an event that has been, or a cultural event that has at least 2 of the prior 5 years have had a permit with the city, an event. And then the other piece to this that we added, because we thought there should be a definition of what a cultural event is, and based on staff's input, we did have a definition that I'm looking for. I think it's on page 2. The cultural event means an event that celebrates or promotes heritage, customs, traditions, or artistic expressions, or that is educational. So it's pretty broad, but it doesn't really talk about religious events and such. So I think we try to define it, but still to kind of make it broad, because people do have different interpretations of cultural. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so that was one of my questions as well, as getting a better understanding of who would qualify based on this definition of a cultural event that has participated at least, or has had a permit with the city at least 2 out of the last 5 years. I would be curious to hear how many would potentially be entering into this lottery, as well as have a better understanding of these events. I don't believe that that information is at hand, but if that is something that could be sent along, that'd be appreciated.
Counselors, I think that the number 30 is kind of in that realm. I think Barbara calculated it based on that desire and the amount of organizations that would regularly be doing it. So we can go back and look at that, but I think that's probably an accurate assumption that those ones would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
And Barbara Lopez does keep very good records, so we can look at how many people in the last 5 years would qualify.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. I know there's been some discussion, there's been this mention of different regulations when the commercial events occur. We had this conversation last time about what a small event is, so it has to be within curb to curb, so it has to be within the plaza park actual. But then there also is a requirement for open space, to make sure that there is safety. And do we have an idea of, what's the maximum number of booths that this could really be incorporating? Do we have a regulation on booth size? Essentially, do we know how many vendors could be at a small commercial event, what a maximum would look like?
Madam Chair, go ahead. I have an idea because Barbara and I talked about this.
Go ahead.
Well, she told me it depends on the type of event. She definitely has parameters of how things get spaced out. But if someone were to want to use the middle of the plaza for dancing and music, they wouldn't put the vendors there. So, it depends. We don't like to say numbers, but it depends on the type of event. I've heard as, little as, people having tables. And the way we can actually visualize it is because Barbara has actually done it, because there's people that have events that want information tables. And so I think it ranges, but I think the most I've seen, and I'm not sure what Pride was, but I thought it was close to 50. But then, to compare it, there was a wellness festival. I don't know if anyone made it down there, and there was a lot of space, and I asked people, well, how many vendors do you think were down there that had information tables? And they thought there was a lot, and there was actually only 30. I asked Barbara about it. So it kind of depends on how they want to set up the event. So I hate to say the number max.
No, I meant, what we think that the maximum would be that there would be fit in. Well, and it could vary depending on how they want to set it in. Although I do know that that Barbara has it written out what the requirements are for open space to make sure that people can, it stays porous and people can't safely get in and out. Yeah, I guess I am still oscillating on the lottery, or not lottery, or first come, first serve. I think that process really needs to be clear and understanding. Is there going to be a certain time period that people can apply? If they already need to have an application, so if we're pulling a lottery or selecting people on January 1st, and they have to put in their plan, I feel like I'm very close to the mic today, and they have to put in their plan 3 months ahead of the event. If they don't know that they're going to be selected for a commercial event until January 1st, they need, say, a month to get everything together. Does that mean that we've essentially knocked out January through April where events could actually happen because we haven't lotteried or picked people until January 1st, so we've taken out a quarter of the year where commercial events could occur? Or is that accounted for?
counselors, we selected January 1st because the majority of events happen in the summer into autumn, so that accounts for that. And I do think that we can accommodate the lottery request. We do need to flesh that out because we were thinking of it differently, but if it's a matter of having a beginning point and an ending point and we select it, I mean, there would be a period of time where we would select the randomized folks, and then we would have to validate that they meet all the other criteria. So it wouldn't be finalized until we could really look at the application and make sure they met it. But I think that that language could be put in there. And the reason January was selected is that we do not typically get requests for activities during that time.
I guess my question then would be, if there, you know, of these potential 30 events, are there any that would have a harder time participating because maybe they do take place in the January to April timeframe? So that would be something that, in Barbara's very detailed records, that I would be curious to get more information on, and I think needs to be considered, because if the idea behind the lottery is to make it equitable for a number of events, we don't want any of them to be knocked out simply because of when they occur, and whether it would actually be possible for them to get all of their ducks in a row based on when the event occurs. So, you know, I don't know if that means that maybe the lottery or the first come, first serve would have to be chosen by, I don't know, July of the year prior in order to give everybody time, if that was something people were interested in. I do think that I need some more info on what this really looks like for communities getting in with the application process. That is something I'd really like to have the sponsors figure out the process here.
Madam Chair, I also want to say that details about the lottery wouldn't be in the ordinance. It actually would be our procedural rules that would outline how that would work. It would actually not explicitly say all the details of how that's going to work. So the fact that we can work out the details for lottery of how staff feels comfortable about it, whether it's like picking names out of the hat or that have come in, we can work that out, and we can also share that with you. It's just that it doesn't affect this, what we need to change and put in the ordinance.
I kind of disagree because I do think that first come, first serve versus lottery makes this very different. You know, we had this conversation about how do, you know, do we, if the idea is to give kind of some different groups some opportunity, I just think that it does kind of change it a little bit. So I think understanding what that looks like makes a difference for me to vote on this.
I actually would like to, I mean, I think we need to work definitely to explain it to you all so you understand it. But I do want to ask Jesse about this because we've talked about like what goes in ordinances and what doesn't, and the description of how the lottery would work is not going to go in the ordinance from my understanding.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, I think that's accurate. The specific details like that would be hashed out separately. If it's stated that it's a lottery, the details of how that lottery is conducted would be an internal sort of way of developing that.
Right, and I think you all should know how it works because I think that's a confusion about first come, first serve versus lottery, because I think we haven't actually had an opportunity to like tie it down to really understand it, but I think we can figure that out. It's just I want to let you know that we wouldn't make a change in our document in the ordinance, so we can definitely work on how that would look so that we're not confusing it with first come, first serve. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Did you want to?
There are a couple changes that would need to be made. Lottery selection is in the ordinance as well as in January of each calendar year, so that question that I had about whether or not that automatically knocks out events that might happen in the first quarter of the year. So it does look like there are some details there that are in ordinance that would need to be figured out and changed before final passage. There has also been a lot, and this is, I'm not sure who has this information. This is kind of where I start to struggle. Do we go for a lottery now? Do we choose some events, small commercial events, and then look at some things? I know that there has been conversation about the impact to businesses, to other vendors, to the plaza artisans. So some of the conversations have been around parking, and if the event is already occurring, there's already going to be parking being taken up downtown. So I think the fact that these are established events is important. And so I do appreciate that that is included in there and that there is that consistency. There's also been some conversation around the impact to sales, essentially, for plaza merchants and to artisans. I think that the small commercial events are probably different than the large commercial events that we are thinking about, because with those, especially when you're thinking about Spanish market and Indian market, there's almost kind of a comparison of goods that's being sold. You know, Spanish and Indian, it's art and jewelry, and that's a lot of what we see at the with the plaza, with the downtown merchants, and with the artisans. So I guess I'm curious what the impact would be for small commercial events, because I think that they're going to be different. And so I don't think I'm not quite sure it's comparable to talk about what has happened at large commercial events as how that would impact these groups and what the small commercial events would look like as well. And so I can actually frame that as an argument to go both ways, to say we don't know what the impact is, so we can't really compare, and also we don't know what the impact is, so maybe we move at a slower rate and see what that impact starts to look like. So I know that is going to be a point of conversation at some juncture. I don't know if there is any data, anything that we might be able to pull on to start to distill that down a little bit more, but I do think it is something to think about. It is really about that balance of providing the access to the community, to a number of different organizations, as well as individuals that are renting space on the plaza and who that is their livelihood on a regular basis. So I'm not entirely sure how to strike that balance and to get the information and to really understand what that impact looks like. I don't know if anybody has information on that at this moment, or if that's just kind of something that we'd have to continue to, similar with the retailers that we were talking about with shopping carts, you know, that has to be part of the ongoing partnerships and conversations. So I'm seeing shaking heads that we don't really have that information at this time. Correct?
Madam Chair, we also don't have any information about the actual economic benefit from these events, and even small events, on what it impacts on people that actually can sell at a small event and what that means to their livelihoods too. So it's like there's a lot of different opinions, and there's also different opinions of merchants that have talked to me that want more events at the plaza, and they think it's fine to have vendors. They don't feel like it hurts them. So there's a lot of different opinions, and that's why I was trying to strike a balance between different kind of interests and different opinions and different. I think there hasn't been anything that can say, yes, this hurts me, yes, this helps me, or even the city actually doing an analysis of what it means for us to have events that allow for commerce, and that's economic development. So yeah, I think that's something we are not going to have for this,
Right, yeah.
to be able to make a decision.
I think it's more kind of conversations for how we continue to evaluate this in the future. And to that point, I mean, I remember working in one of the downtown restaurants. You staff up for Spanish market and Indian market weekends, and working as a host on those weekends was awful and very busy. So I think that just as we continue to move forward with commercial events, it's something for us to think about and something for us to continue to look at and really analyze that. Councilor, I see that you have another question, comment.
Just a quick comment, and I think that, you know, with any new venture, you aren't going to really have the data until you actually start rolling with it. And you know, we can try to get statistics and we can try to see, okay, well, who's this going to affect, who is it not going to affect, and some people it may benefit and others it may not. And so, I mean, you know, the bottom line I think here is to see how this works. And again, it could come back and be revisited, and we can amend things for it and continue from there. I think we have the power to do that. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, Counselor, I completely agree. And that's, I think, why I'm questioning whether we take it slower, because we can come back and add, but it's really hard to take things away. It's a lot easier to give more than to pull back once we've moved. But
Well, and if I also just may say that, you know, I think at 8 events, it's very comfortable, and so I had heard the number of 10. It's been, you know, brought back to 8. I think that having the three organizations who have somewhat been established and have even come to governing body for public comment, obviously are very interested in continuing probably in the future. Having the extra, I guess, 5 spots allows opportunity for different events to be able to have time on the plaza, which is such a beautiful space to be at. And so if we were to create an established 8 slots, then how do we allow for other people that may have interest at some point in the future? And so I think that, you know, the way that it is, it sounds like it's pretty well thought out. But I'll go ahead and see if anybody has anything else to.
Director Brown.
Madam Chair, if I could address some of this questions around economic impact. So we have created a data platform here in the city, and one of the things that it does track is geotraffic for tourism. And to Councilor Garcia's point, if we pilot these programs or just bring our 8 in, we'll be able to benchmark them for the next year so that you can actually have data that could inform how you might change or amend some of the work that's done. It's difficult for some of these events that might be too small where we can really track down how much revenue is being pushed through, but you can pull out GRT. You can see a blip in the screen on GRT on those days. So the data platform would be able to help us with data in the year's time after you've piloted them out. So I just wanted to add that from an economic impact standpoint.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful to be getting that on a lot of these pieces. I'm guessing that we can't quite drill down we could probably drill down into industry sectors though, so we could see, like, is there a blip that an increase in restaurants, increase in hotels? I'm not sure about established merchants, if we'd be able to see increases there, if it all get.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's definitely a macro view of categories. They call them NAIPS codes, so restaurants, hotels, et cetera. But what's exciting about the data platform and the geocaching is that blip of the screen on the day of the event, you can actually tell where people are moving. So they may spend downtown, they may spend south of town, they may spend midtown, so you can see where that blip of screen shows where the spend may happen. It may all happen for that time on that day, but if you do see a growth of spend throughout the city, then you know that you're getting a bigger impact because they may be coming to visit friends, they may be spending in restaurants that are not just downtown. It could be for the whole city. So I just wanted to let you know that there is a way that we can try to measure some of the economic impact through the data platform.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the committee before we start making motions? And I see that there are some amendments that we may or may not be taken up. So if we want to get a main motion on the floor, that would be great.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to approve the bill, and then also consider my amendment because it's actually something I'd already talked about, and I know there's some outstanding kind of questions to understand about events when they occur, especially at the first quarter. I do remember Barbara telling us very few events occur at the beginning, but we definitely, just to give you numbers, we can get that. And then just tying down how the lottery can work best for staff. But I'd like it to move forward because there's other things that I think are important to consider. And we still have a long way to go here. We have a lot more committees, and yeah, so I'll stop there, and I also want to talk about my amendment.
Okay, so we have a main motion on the floor to approve. Is there a second?
Again.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Councilman Villarreal, back to you for your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment adds in pride after discussions with them. So it basically adjusts, it names the three, Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples' Day, and Pride is added as my amendment. So it adjusts those lottery numbers from 6 to 5, and then all of the adjustments that need to be made in the language to accommodate that. I don't know if you want me to go through those. And then the other important one that I want to make sure people know about is what was kind of came out of stakeholder discussions with the Plaza Artisans, is they want to make sure, and I think this is important, that they're not charged, they shall not be charged additional fees to sell during the commercial event permit, small commercial event permits. Small commercial permitted events.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's not what the language is. The language is that they shall not be charged additional fees to sell during the events.
Okay. Would you like to move your amendment?
Yes. Motion to move my amendment.
Move to approve your amendment?
Move to approve my amendment.
And is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
And is there any questions or discussions specifically on this amendment? And if not, can I please get a roll call?
Yes.
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 Bassett, yes. You were doing so well today. All right, so the amendment has been passed. Any other, is there another amendment that would like to be moved today, or is that amendment not being moved at this time?
Not being moved at this time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the bill as amended, or are we ready for a vote on the bill as amended? And I think we are ready. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to our discussion item. So we are going to be discussing the request for approval of Community Development Block Grant CARES Act, CDBG/CV agreement in the amount of $581,333 to support operations, programs, and case management at Santa Fe Suites, Community Solutions International, Inc., DBA, Vincent's Legacy, LLC. We have Cody Minich, we have Alexandra Ladd, and we also have Edward Archuleta here. I wanted to take the opportunity to put this on discussion, really to have the team talk about the model of Santa Fe Suites and identify how this has been going, what this is looking like as we continue to move forward. We know that there has been discussions around this model as part of the solution to how we work with homelessness in our community and how we can really be providing supportive housing. So I will go ahead and turn the floor over to the team. If you guys just want to give me some information about, or give us some information about Santa Fe Suites, how things are moving, how things are going, what's been working, what we've needed to adjust, and what things are looking like on the floor, or on the ground. I will let you guys decide who is best to answer this question.
Madam Chair, thank you, members of the committee. This is a really great opportunity to talk about this project because this is pretty innovative, and we haven't done this before, even though it seems like it should be obvious, right? How do you end homelessness? You provide housing. And yet that hasn't been the way that homelessness has been addressed in the past. And we're not alone in doing this. Many communities across the country are starting to figure out this piece. We had an opportunity when CARES Act was first made available to really move quickly and help help with the purchase price. The city had this opportunity. The nonprofit that we worked with, I think all of you know this, Community Solutions is a national nonprofit. It's the umbrella organization for the Built for Zero initiative, which looks at using data and a by name list to end homelessness, which helps with keeping folks both in a system but connected to various pieces of a system, because that's kind of one of the hardest pieces of working with unhoused people, is that they're not in a place. What I'd like to do is let Cody speak to any of the funding questions you might have, and then Edward Archuleta, I'd like him to speak to actually how things are going at the suites, how this funding will be used to augment and support the work there. And I do want to just clarify that Santa Fe Suites is not 100% housing for homeless. It's about a third set aside for folks who are either experiencing homelessness, have recently experienced homelessness, or just would be homeless if they couldn't live there. And it is, in the context of CARES Act funding, it is a response to COVID to get folks housed as quickly as possible. But Cody, if you want to talk just briefly about how CDBG works and how this is the second round of CARES funding that we received.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councilors. So this is the second round of CARES Act, and it's entitled through our CDBG grant. So we have $581,333. And of course, the city's been involved with Santa Fe Suites from the get-go, and it's such an amazing program, but the continued success of it really relies on building out the capacity of it and really supporting this permanent supportive housing model. So the funding would be going towards, I believe, adding full-time case managers, navigators. It's kind of very similar to the Built for Zero models, where all the tenants that are there are going to have tailored resources for them, and I don't really know what else to say.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions specifically about the funding at this time? Thank you, Cody. And Edward, thank you so much for being here today. If you can just provide some more information generally on how things have been going at Santa Fe Suites, what you've been seeing, how many people are we housing, how many people are on that wait list?
Thank you, Madam Chair, City Councilors. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the City of Santa Fe for this governing body, to the staff of the Office of Affordable Housing for giving St. Elizabeth's the opportunity to manage Santa Fe Suites. I'm the Executive Director of St. Elizabeth's. We have 5 facilities, 5 separate facilities around town. We have 2 shelters. We have the men's shelter on Ellery Street, which most everybody knows about. We have Casa Familia, which is for single women and families on Berry Avenue, and then we have 3 supportive housing projects. We have a total of 158 apartments right now that we manage. The suites is the largest at 120. We have Casa Cerrillos, which is 30 units for single men and women who are disabled. And we have Sonrisa, which is an 8-plex of 2- and 3-bedroom apartments for families. We took over the Santa Fe Suites about 1.5 years ago with 6 weeks' notice. Thank you, Alex. But let me tell you, it's turned into a great success. We still have issues that we're dealing with, mainly with encampments around the property. We need to get better security going on down there. There's a lot of drug activity, unfortunately, with folks in the encampments going back and forth between the suites. But otherwise, it's going great. We have quite a staff. We have 2 co-program managers. We have a housing navigator. We have a licensed therapist. We have 2 leasing agents. We have a maintenance person and a resident manager. We're in the process now of hiring a behavioral health crisis clinician and a peer support worker. So the key to really getting the homeless off the streets and getting them housed is to have the supportive wraparound services. You can put somebody into housing, but if you forget about them, they're going to be back out on the streets or back in the shelter, guaranteed, probably within a year. Before I became director of St. Elizabeth's, I was the case manager at the men's shelter for 6 years. And it was so frustrating to spend weeks, months, years getting somebody housed. and then see them come back to the shelter within 6 months, a year, 2 years later, because they were not supported. First thing I did when I became director of St. Elizabeth's was to hire an outreach case manager to work with folks once we got them housed to see that they stayed housed, to make visits with them, to make visits to their apartments, make sure they're paying their rent, that they're cleaning their apartment, they're paying their bills, they're going to the doctor, they're taking their medications, and it has been so successful. We're getting very few returns now for those that are working with the outreach case manager. And at the suites, right now about 2/3, about 90 people there were formerly homeless. Alex mentioned, we started out, it was supposed to be like 50-50, the numbers varied all over the place, but right now we have taken about 90 formerly homeless folks off the streets and housed them. And they're working with the staff very intensely. We have Healthcare for the Homeless has an office there now, an exam room, so folks don't even have to go see a doctor. The doctor comes to see them, or the nurse practitioner. We have AA meetings, NA meetings, we have art therapy, we have group therapy, we've got, it's amazing. We've got the Santa Fe Recovery Center comes in and does classes there, meets with folks. We've got the Mountain Center coming to meet with folks. It really is, it could be an example, should be an example of how to run a supportive housing program. I testified this last legislative session before the legislature and told them, you guys, if you want to come and see how to get people off the streets and get them housed and keep them housed, come to the Santa Fe Suites and take a look. And they were pretty amazed. They were like, wow, we really got to go check this place out. So I'm really proud of the work that my staff has done. I've got an incredible staff over there, and I'm really proud of the work they've done. So I stand for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Archuleta. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for all your great work. It's such a beautiful thing to see people working for those less fortunate and that need help. And, I guess my question would be is, how do you guys establish the people that you're moving out out of their situation into a stable environment where they have jobs, where they're able to be self-sustaining? Because I think that's the bottom line, is once they leave from your care, how do they go on and find their own house, or have found their own house, have a job stable enough to continue to pay their bills, and so on and so forth? Do they still sometimes fall back on your services to continue, continue their livelihood after they leave?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the outreach case manager, if somebody moves out of the Santa Fe Suites into their own place, the outreach manager will follow up with them to see if they need further services. So we still keep tabs on them even after they leave one of our programs, if they want services. Is that what you were?
Yeah, and also while they're with you, is there any kind of jobs training, or maybe funneling, or working with other businesses in the community who could be potential employers to them that could get them on their way to be self-sustaining?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we don't have a works program yet, but we've been talking about that. We do refer them to different agencies like Goodwill, or to Workforce Connections of the state of New Mexico. The housing navigators, which are basically case managers, will work with folks to help them get employment. We also have on staff at the men's shelter a Social Security disability specialist. So anybody who comes into any of our programs is disabled, we will do all of their Social Security paperwork for them to get them either SSI or SSDI.
Thank you. I just kind of, again, yeah, I know when you say how do we solve this issue, this issue that we're having with those that are homeless, the people that are unhoused, and just putting them in a facility without any services provided to them, and I appreciate your work with that. is actually solving the problem that we have, is getting them on their journey to being self-sustaining and contributing to our community and contributing to our employment issues that we're having and so on and so forth. And I know a lot of that has to do with, you know, maybe their dependency on alcohol, dependency on drugs, and mental illness, and so on and so forth. But once again, I do thank you guys for the work that you're doing, and I think your comment about having a good structure for them is really important, and I think we need more facilities like yours. Thank you.
I do too, thank you.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Counselor Chavez.
I just wanted to share my appreciation. I loved hearing you talk about wraparound services. In my past community work, I would always say they're going to keep needing resources if we don't set them up to not need them anymore. And so with everything you described, just thank you so much. It does sound like an example that should be followed, and I appreciate you having that here in Santa Fe. That's really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Councilman Villarreal, anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate Ed so much. I just look at you and go, wow, every day the work you do.
Don't embarrass me.
Makes me want to cry sometimes just because it's work that goes unseen. And I mean, a lot of your colleagues too that work in the work you do, and I just praise you. And I just really want to thank you for that. I've known Ed a long time, so when I see him in this position and then taking on more and then being a partner with us for Santa Fe Suites, it's so important, and I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate you.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate you too.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And I appreciate our staff that put this all together because it's a lot. So much work and bureaucracy with the CDBG funding, so glad we are able to piece it together for something that really makes sense and that we were already doing, so thank you.
Ed, can you remind me, so how many, 90 formerly homeless, how many individuals total are living at Santa Fe Suites right now? Or how many families?
There's 120 apartments, and there's probably about 130 individuals, because there's some couples, and there's a couple of single parents with children, which isn't the best place for children, because, well, first of all, the units are very small. They're only about 300 square feet. They're small efficiencies. You have full kitchens, though, and full bathroom, but it's a combination living room, bedroom. By the way, if any of you would ever like a tour of the place, just give me a call, and I'd be more than happy to give you a personal tour of the place. So there's probably about 130 people there right now. And like I said, about 90 of them came off the streets or from shelters or living in their cars or couch surfing or whatever.
I've heard that there's a substantial wait list at Santa Fe Suites. Do you know how many?
Madam Chair, there's about, I think it's like 60 people on there right now.
And are these 60 individual people, or are some of them would be a cohabitating?
Most of them are singles. There's a few couples on there. It's a huge wait list. But there is there's fairly, rapid turnover on some of the places, because we do background checks on everybody, and if somebody has a very violent, a history of violence or a lot of, drug trafficking or something like that, we'll interview them, or the staff there will interview them to see if they think that they're suitable for the place, and there's a few that we, turn down. Unfortunately, like I said, the biggest problem we have right now is drug use. Drug trafficking, people coming and going, and we're trying to correct it. We're working with the city police department, with security, with staff. But it's a big issue. The reason that a lot of folks are homeless out on the streets is because of substance abuse, as we all know. That's the number one reason, in my opinion, why a lot of these folks, like you see on Cerritos Road, it's really sad what's going on out there. And we try to help them. We won't take anybody in our shelters if they're actively using, but we still help them. They still come to the door wanting food. Excuse me, if they need food, clothing, toiletries, blankets, sleeping bags, tents, we still give that out. But they just can't stay with us if they're actively using. If they're sober, yeah, they can stay there.
About Santa Fe Suites as well, that this is a,
Santa Fe Suites is a housing first model, so they can use there as long as they maintain, quote unquote maintain. But if they're actively using, drinking or using, and they're behaving and not causing any trouble, that's fine. We want them to stay housed. The case managers and the therapists will work with them to try to get them the help that they need. But the number one thing is to get them off the streets first and then deal with their issues. But if they start causing trouble, if they're drug trafficking or if they're, making a lot of noise or fighting or anything like that, then they're out of there, unfortunately.
I do appreciate that housing first model and the ability for those case managers to build that relationship with individuals, because after, as Councilor Chavez will frequently discuss, a lot of this roots back to trauma. And so there's trust issues. And so the ability for them to build those relationships is really, really crucial. So thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I think, as you've mentioned, this has been successful. You've seen some turnover, and I'm hoping that some of that turnover is people essentially being able to move into more independent housing. Is that where we're seeing more turnover? Is it frequently more individuals not being able to stay?
No, Madam Chair, we are getting people into other housing. I was there this morning at a staff meeting, and I asked them for the numbers. They have gotten 22 people over the last year and a half into civic housing or Section 8 vouchers into private apartments somewhere. So if somebody qualifies to get into housing somewhere else, they help them get into other housing. So others can move in off the streets. So it's not, if they want to stay there permanently, they can, but if they qualify for another program, we work to get them
Wonderful.
somewhere else.
And with that continued case management, if they so choose to take it.
That's correct.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really
welcome.
Really appreciate the work and really being willing to take on this model. I know that all of our organizations in the city that are working on this issue are pretty stretched thin, that there is not enough staff in general working in this field right now. And so it is really just incredible the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Councilor. I appreciate that.
Alexandra, I see you standing, as if there was something to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention that the council approved funding as recommended by the Community Development Commission through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to help make improvements to the property, including a fence and some equipment for cameras and more security. So when we talk to Edward again in 6 months, maybe that problem will be somewhat alleviated.
Wonderful. Good. Glad to hear. Well, thank you so much, and we'll definitely want to be continuing to get updates on some of these models and how they're working. I think that it is really helpful as we continue to look at the issues of homelessness, of housing insecurity in our community. So thank you to all of you for really being willing to be innovative and try these new solutions. And if there are no other questions or comments from the committee, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. If I could please get a roll call. Really? Oh. I'll allow it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Don't shut up. Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Don't we all?
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you so much. No executive session. Any matters from staff? Director Brown.
Madam Chair, there are no matters from staff.
Thank you. Any matters from the committee? Councilwoman Vidareal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to move. I'm still thinking about me saying that. Anyway. Long day. I just wanted to let you all know, last night at our Community Health and Safety Task Force meeting, we had a presentation by an expert panel from different communities, and it was about overdose prevention and overdose prevention centers that are now existing, that are coming up in different jurisdictions. And it's essentially allowing for people to use in centers in a safe environment. And it was fascinating. I learned so much. I was like, wow, this is amazing about what's happening. And then just kind of like what was the pushback for them in getting it approved, and just really amazing panelists and their knowledge on the topics. So I encourage you to look on our website. There is a Community Health and Safety Task Force page that has all our meetings. I don't know if this one is uploaded yet because we just had it this week, but if you want to see it, I think it's probably uploaded, and Julie has the Zoom recording. But I just learned so much, and it actually made me excited thinking about ways that people have addictions and how to manage that, but also put them in a safe environment where people are able to, I don't even know, it's not even about promoting someone's addiction. It's about really trying to help them so that we're saving lives, and that there's ways that people, if they're going to use, that they do it correctly. And then there's also this rehabilitation piece too. So I encourage you to watch it. It is long, but it was amazing. So just want to share that with you. And I can just let you know, and we do have panel discussions that you should maybe, that's relevant to quality of life and the discussions we have. And so just wanted to ping that for you all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I definitely will need to watch that one. Any other matters from members of the committee? Councilor Lee Garcia? Oh, okay. I saw the mic pop on. So, all right. No matters from the chair. Next meeting is Wednesday, August 17th, and at 6:55 p.m. we are adjourned. Thank you.